Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on Wednesday, the 26th of June. My name is Brian Liddy, and I'd just like to start the show by apologising for our tardy start this evening. But here we are now with you. So, one of the reasons that we have been late starting is that we're making a lot of technical updates in the control room, and some of that's easier said than done. But Ukraine update day today is day 854. US and Russian defense chiefs forgive me, I'll start that again. The US and Russian defense chiefs spoke by telephone on Tuesday in a rare conversation between the two powers, and with tensions rising after Moscow blamed Washington for a deadly Ukraine attack over the weekend on the Russian annexed Crimea. The two sides gave widely divergent accounts of the discussion, the first between the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Russia's Defense Minister Andrei Belyusov. Austin initiated the conversation, and it was the first such call since March 2023, Pentagon spokesperson Patrick Ryder told reporters. Russia's defense ministry, however, said that Belyusov warned Austin of the dangers of continued US arms supplies to Ukraine. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, issued arrest warrants for Russia's former defense minister and its military chief of staff on Tuesday for attacking civilian targets in Ukraine. The court is accusing Sergei Shoigu and leading Russian General Valery Gerasimov of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Ukraine applauded the ICC's issuing of the arrest warrants, saying it was an important decision. Russia's Security Council said the arrest warrants were part of a hybrid war against Moscow. Shoigu is the Security Council secretary. Forgive me. Ukrainian troops trying to hold their ground on the Eastern Front in Donetsk region may still be outnumbered by Russian forces, but the shell hunger that plagued them for months as ammunition started to run out is now behind them, according to media reports. An elderly woman was killed, 4 people injured, and scores of buildings damaged in multiple air attacks by Ukraine on the southern Russian region of Belgorod, the governor said on Tuesday. Russia's defense ministry said its air defense systems destroyed 29 Ukraine-launched drones over the region. Russia and Ukraine each handed back 90 prisoners of war on Tuesday, in the latest of several periodic swaps in their conflict, with the United Arab Emirates overseeing the exchange as an intermediary. The last exchange took place on the 31st of May, when each side handed over 75 prisoners of war, the first exchange in nearly 4 months. Russia said it was banning access inside Russia to the broadcasts of 81 different media outlets from the EU, including Agence France Presse and Politico, in retaliation for a similar EU ban on several Russian media outlets. Moscow accused the outlets of systematically distributing inaccurate information about what Russia calls its special military operation in Ukraine. The EU said in May it was suspending the distribution of what it described as 4 Kremlin-linked propaganda networks. Moscow expects to sign a new deal on comprehensive cooperation with Iran soon, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko has said. And now the latest from Israel Gaza. At least 37,658 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the 7th of October, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. A high risk of famine persists across the whole of Gaza Strip as long as conflict between Israel and Hamas continues and humanitarian access is restricted, according to an assessment by a global hunger monitor, IPC. Israeli forces killed at least 24 Palestinians in 3 separate airstrikes on Gaza City early on Tuesday, health officials have said, while tanks deepened their incursion into the town of Rafah in the south of the territory. 2 of the strikes hit 2 schools in Gaza City, killing at least 14 people, medics said. Another strike on a house in the Shati beach camp, one of the Gaza Strip's 8 historic refugee camps, killed 10 others. According to Reuters, Israel's Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday that the government must draft ultra-Orthodox Jewish seminary students to the conscript military, a decree likely to send shockwaves through Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock on Tuesday announced 19 million euros, that's $20.3 million, in more aid to Gaza and criticised parts of the Israeli government for actions that she said undermined the territory's long-term security. Baerbock was in Jerusalem as part of efforts to prevent war between Israel and Hamas from escalating into a regional conflict. Anti-Semitic incidents in Germany, from graffiti to attempted arson, rose about 83% last year, watchdog Rias said on Tuesday, surging after the Hamas-led attack on Israel on the 7th of October and Israel's military offensive in the Gaza Strip. Around half of the 4,782 recorded anti-Semitic incidents were linked with anti-Israel activism, with many involving a relativization or denial of the Nazi Holocaust in which 6 million Jews were killed, Rias said. Israel will spend the coming weeks trying to resolve the conflict with Lebanon's Iran-backed group Hezbollah and would prefer a diplomatic solution, Israel's National Security Advisor said on Tuesday. National Security Advisor Tachi Hanegbi also said Israel was discussing with Washington a possible joint effort by the US, European and some Arab countries to find a replacement for Hamas rule in the Gaza Strip. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas will visit Russia, Russian news agencies reported on Tuesday, citing Kremlin Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov. TASS said Ushakov did not disclose the timing, but said the dates had been agreed. Another state agency, the RIA, said Abbas had planned to come to Russia in November last year, but the visit was postponed at the request of the Palestinian side. Now, with just 8 days left until the vote, here's today's general election campaign roundup. Applications for voter ID certificates have jumped in recent days, with 2,915 submitted on Monday and 3,319 submitted yesterday. That's well above the average of 1,527 applications a day since the general election was called. Not all types of photo ID will be accepted at polling stations, but a passport, a driving licence or a blue badge are valid. Other forms of permitted ID include older or disabled persons' bus passes, that includes your Scottish Saltire pass, and an identity card bearing the Proof of Age Standards Scheme or PASS hologram. Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer are preparing to debate head-to-head for the second and final time of this general election campaign, starting at 8:15 p.m. this evening. Craig Williams, the Tory candidate and former parliamentary aide to Rishi Sunak, accused of using inside information to place a bet on the timing of the election, has been interviewed by the Gambling Commission as part of its inquiry. During the interview earlier today, Williams was cautioned and interviewed by 2 ex-police officers and a former HMRC official, all 3 of whom are now investigators at the Commission. Up to 15 Conservative candidates and officials are being looked at by the Gambling Commission over alleged betting on the timing of the general election. Wales Fiscal Analysis, that's a research body at Cardiff University, has published a report today saying the Welsh Government will face significant spending challenges whichever of the two main parties wins the election. Commenting on the report, Liz Saville-Roberts, the Plaid Cymru leader at Westminster, said, "This report reveals a stark truth. Labour is not being honest about the deep cuts it plans to inflict on Welsh public services when it gets into power in Westminster. It is proof that the change being offered by Keir Starmer is nothing but more austerity wrapped in red packaging." Douglas Ross was in Fraserburgh today, where he signed a Scottish Fishermen's Federation pledge to champion the fishing communities of Aberdeenshire North and Moray East. The SFF were prominent Leave supporters in the Brexit campaign. Anna Sarwar is reported to have been irritated after he was grilled on Scottish independence during an interview on BBC Radio Scotland this morning. The Scottish Labour leader was asked about a range of topics, including GB energy and gender reform. He was also pressed on what a Labour government would offer people in Scotland and why people who voted SNP in previous general elections should give their vote to Scottish Labour. Alex Cole-Hamilton, the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, admitted he had placed bets on who would be elected in some constituencies in Scotland at next week's general election. Scottish Greens have led calls for an investigation into Trump's dealings in Scotland since 2017. Excuse me. Former First Minister Alex Salmond today said Scotland is at a pivotal moment in its history as he launched the Alba Party manifesto. One of the party's key pledges is to fight to save the Grangemouth refinery from closure. First Minister and SNP leader John Swinney spent this afternoon meeting members of a youth project in Drumchapel, one of Glasgow's most deprived areas. He questioned whether Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack should still be heading to the House of Lords after revelations that he joked about placing a bet on the timing of the election, and said that, unlike Keir Starmer, he believes there is a need for a ban on politicians and candidates betting on politics. And a new poll has predicted the SNP is to win a majority of Scottish seats while leaving the Tories with none. Commissioned by The Economist and conducted by We Think, the survey projected that the SNP are on course to win 29 seats in Scotland. That's a majority of the 57 on offer, while Labour were predicted to win 23 Scottish seats, with the Lib Dems on 5 and the Tories facing a complete wipeout. Gareth Jenkins, a former engineer for Fujitsu, the company responsible for developing the post office's faulty Horizon IT system, has said he knew the computer system could, in theory, be accessed remotely by its staff for nearly 2 decades before realising it was happening in practice. This is Jenkins' second day of evidence to the Post Office inquiry, which is looking at why the state-owned institution prosecuted 900 operatives on the basis of alleged financial shortfalls in their branches when many of the discrepancies were caused by bugs, errors and defects in the Horizon IT system. Jenkins told the inquiry he knew that remote access to the Horizon IT system by Fujitsu's staff was technically possible from about the year 2000, shortly after its introduction across branches. Said he believed at the time it was controlled, recorded and visible to post office operatives. He did not realise it was being used in practice until 2018. Jason Beer, KC, counsel to the inquiry, asked Jenkins if they were doing it in the hours of business when a sub-postmaster was logged on, there might be attributed to him or her. Jenkins replied, "Yes, I accept that." Jenkins joined International Computers, which later became Fujitsu, in 1973 and retired in 2015, but was kept on as a consultant until 2022. He helped the Post Office in its defence in a High Court case brought by Sir Alan Bates and 554 others that ultimately paved the way for the criminal convictions to be overturned. Jenkins said in his witness statement, as a result of the civil proceedings in 2018-2019 and now this inquiry, I have also learned that there were rare occasions when the Post Office were not told and did not approve Fujitsu's use of substantive remote access, and that this was contrary to Fujitsu's procedures. He went on to say this was inconsistent with my previous understanding that Post Office always approved each incident of substantive remote access. Jenkins, who is testifying all week, is part of a Metropolitan Police investigation into possible perjury and perverting the course of justice. Before his testimony started this week, he was reminded of his privilege against self-incrimination by the judge leading the inquiry, Sir Wynne Williams. A Russian court has begun a closed-door trial of the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich on spying charges that he, his employer, and the US government have all described as politically motivated. Gershkovich appeared in a courtroom in Ekaterinburg on Wednesday, his head shaven by prison authorities after being transferred from the Moscow jail where he has been held since March 2023. Gershkovich is the first American journalist to be arrested in Russia on espionage charges since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The proceedings have been closed to the public, as is common in espionage and spying cases, forgive me, making it illegal for the press to publish any evidence or testimony that is heard in the case. Vladimir Putin has indicated he wants to trade Gershkovich for Russians serving prison sentences abroad, including an alleged FSB assassin convicted of murder in Germany. The US and Russia have held talks about a prisoner swap but have not yet come to a deal. Journalists were allowed in briefly to see Gershkovich, who smiled and nodded his head at colleagues as he stood in a glass box reserved for courtroom defendants. The courtroom was then cleared, and the maximum sentence is 20 years in prison. Gershkovich was accredited by the Russian Foreign Ministry to work in the country, and the Wall Street Journal has said he has been arrested for merely doing his job as a journalist. To even call it a trial, however, is unfair to Evan and a continuation of this travesty of justice that already has gone on for far too long, wrote Emma Tucker, the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal. She went on to say this bogus accusation of espionage will inevitably lead to a bogus conviction for an innocent man who would then face up to 20 years in prison for simply doing his job. Gershkovich was arrested during a reporting trip to Ekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains in March last year and then transferred to Moscow's Lefortovo prison, which is run by the FSB security service and holds high-value prisoners. Investigators allege he was there to gather information on Uralagov Gonzavod, forgive me, I'll try that again, Uralvagonzavod, a Russian arms manufacturer based near Ekaterinburg that makes the country's main battle tanks along with other armaments. They have published no evidence in the case. The US has accused Russia of conducting hostage diplomacy. It has designated Gershkovich and other jailed American Paul Whelan as wrongfully detained and says it is committed to bringing them home. In a statement on Wednesday, the US said that embassy officials had been able to attend the hearing and called on Russia to release Gershkovich and Whelan immediately. German climate activists are taking the government to court for unconstitutional climate policy, seeking to build on a landmark victory 3 years ago that they had hoped would force Europe's biggest polluter to clean up quickly. The activists urge that the new climate law is too weak, that a recent update makes it harder to enforce, and that inaction from the Transport Ministry, which is repeatedly failing to meet its emission targets, will force tough measures on poor groups in the future. Germany is a major car maker which burns coal for 1/4 of its electricity. Excuse me, the country is on track to fall short of its target to cut the release of planet heating pollutants into the air by 65% by 2030 compared to a 1990 baseline. Germany's top court ruled a previous version of its climate law partly unconstitutional in 2021 when activists won a legal challenge. Chided by the court and admonished by activists, the previous government updated the law to cut emissions faster and include targets for each sector. But this year, under pressure from the market liberal Free Democrats Party, a minor coalition partner that controls the transport and finance ministries, the current government scrapped the sectoral targets, watered down requirements for catch-up actions, and reduced legal pressure to plan beyond 2030. The previous ruling deemed Germany's old climate law unconstitutional because it violated intertemporal freedoms, pushing the burden of fast action onto future generations, but stopped short of saying the government had failed in its obligation so far. Since then, Germany's specific watchdogs have repeatedly documented gaps between targets and actions in sectors of the economy, such as transport and buildings. The Council of Experts on Climate Change, a body set up by the German government after the climate law was first established, said that a Transport Ministry action plan to make up for its shortcomings in 2022 was too weak to even warrant a formal assessment. The activists argue the government has wastefully used up the carbon budget in the 3 years since the last court ruling. They point to its rejection of cheap policies to cut pollution, such as putting a general speed limit on motorways, as missed opportunities. The complaint brought by Friday for Future Together with other environmental groups, including Greenpeace and German Watch, also argues that people in rural areas and other socially disadvantaged groups will be hit hardest by tougher measures necessary to make up for a lack of action today. Teenage girls and young women arrested by the Taliban for wearing bad hijab say they have been subjected to sexual violence and assault in detention. In more than one case, the arrests and sexual abuse that young women face while in custody earlier this year led to suicide and attempted suicide, reporters from the Afghan news service Zan Times were told. In one case, a woman's body was allegedly found in a canal a few weeks after she had been taken into custody by Taliban militants, with a source close to her family saying she had been sexually abused before her death. The UN say that many women were detained by the Taliban for bad hijab in December 23 and January 2024, following a Taliban decree that women must cover themselves from head to toe, revealing only their eyes. At the time, the UN called the arrests concerning, and, and girls and women reported that they had been subjected to beatings and intimidation while in detention. Now, the girls and young women are coming forward to report that they also face sexual violence and abuse by the Taliban police with devastating consequences. The reports of sexual violence and assault against women and girls in detention comes as the Taliban are expected to attend a UN conference on Afghanistan in Doha on the 30th of June, where the UN has confirmed that no Afghan women will participate and women's rights will not be discussed. New powers have come into force, allowing a court to prevent those convicted of murder or culpable homicide from acting as an executor on their victim's estate. This is a new Scot Gov law. Forgive me, I'm going to go back. I'm going to start this again because apparently I've misspoken there. So new powers have come into force, allowing a court to prevent those convicted of murder or culpable homicide from acting as an executor on their. I'm sorry, it's not executor, it's an executor. So I'm tempted to start again. New powers have New powers have come into force, allowing a court to prevent those convicted of murder or culpable homicide from acting as an executor on their victim's estate. The measures are part of the Trusts and Succession Scotland Act 2024, which was passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament in December 2023. Other parts of the Act that come into force today include the power for a co-trustee to remove a professional trustee, such as an accountant or solicitor, if they are no longer a member of their regulated profession or entitled to practice. This provision was included in the legislation in response to concerns that arose following the collapse of the WWNJ McClure firm of solicitors. Victims and Community Safety Minister Siobhan Brown said, preventing killers from being executed. That's that word again. Preventing killers from being executors is an important part of this legislation. Forgive me, viewers. It will stop added anguish for victims, loved ones, as happened to the family of Carol Taggart, who was murdered by her son, who was also her executor, Carol's friends and family are to be commended for campaigning for this important change to the law, which will prevent it happening to another family. More generally, the law of trusts and succession needed to be updated to keep pace with how society has changed and developed, with these new measures to help to ensure that our law is more relevant and can better meet the needs of modern Scotland. MSPs have backed a range of technical updates to the short-term lets licensing scheme in response to engagement with accommodation operators. Licensing was introduced in 2022 to provide assurance to guests on safety and quality, such as gas and electrical safety compliance and the substitutability of hosts. Regulation passed by the Scottish Parliament enables licences to be transferred to a new host, such as when accommodation is sold, prospective hosts building, excuse me, prospective hosts building a new short-term let to apply for a provisional licence before construction is complete. It also allows hosts to apply for a maximum of 3 licence exemptions, totalling 6 weeks in a calendar year. So Minister for Housing Paul McLennan said, short-term let accommodation is vital to Scotland's tourism sector and wider economy. Short-term lets licensing scheme aims to protect the reputation of responsible operators and ensure the sector is regulated in line with other accommodation such as hotels and caravan parks, giving guests assurance of consistent safety standards. The technical updates to the scheme passed by Parliament were introduced in response to engagement with short-term let operators and the wider tourism industry. He went on to say, this will ensure the scheme continues to deliver quality and safety assurance for guests whilst protecting the needs of local communities. A series of monumental wall sculptures are going on display in the University of Edinburgh in the most comprehensive UK exhibition of one of Africa's most acclaimed artists. Ghanaian artist El Anatswi's exhibition at the university's Talbot Rice Gallery will feature a series of his iconic metal wall hangings crafted out of bottle tops alongside carved wooden reliefs and printed works on paper. The exhibition will include a monumental 15-metre wide outdoor wall hanging, Sia Searching for Connection, which will cover the facade of the Old College Quadrangle. Natswi's work, which reflects on cultural heritage and the impact of colonialism, has been the subject of major international museum exhibitions, including the most recent in Tate Modern's Turbine Hall in London. Titled Scottish Mission Book Depot Keta, the Talbot Rice Gallery exhibition is named after a Scottish missionary book depot that provided books and crayons to Anatsui as a child and helped influence his early artistic development. The exhibition invites audiences to explore the rich and vibrant tapestry of his 5-decade career, which began in the aftermath of the British colonial period in Ghana, and now he uses his art to engage with the complex legacies of colonialism in Africa. Highlights include the debut of a new wall sculpture created specifically for Talbot Rice Gallery, alongside notable work Women's Cloth, which is on loan from the British Museum. His metal wall hangings are made by stitching together aluminium bottle tops reclaimed from Ghanaian and Nigerian liquor stores. Reclaimed from Ghanaian and Nigerian liquor bottling and printing press industries. Through traditional weaving methods, his work creates intricate shapes, patterns, and reflective effects to evolve the reclaimed metal into a new form that echoes his experiences of a post-colonial society. One of the most celebrated contemporary artists in the world, Anatsui was awarded the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement at the 56th Venice Biennale in 2015. While his work is exhibited in the Talbot Rice Gallery, Anatsui will be recognised with an honorary degree from the University of Edinburgh at this year's graduations. and that's where you will visit Scotland's capital in July to receive the title of Doctor Honoris Causa for his significant contributions to the art world. Tessa Giblin, curator of the exhibition and director of Talbot Rice Gallery, said, "Working with El Anatsui on making this exhibition has been a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Against the backdrop of Old College, El Anatsui's work, with its powerful commentary on history and heritage, will invite visitors to reflect on Scotland's and indeed the University of Edinburgh's own complex colonial legacies. Scottish Mission Book Depot Cater is free for visitors and will run from 29th of June to the 29th of September 2024. Well, that's it for this evening. But just before I go, I want to firstly apologise for stumbling over certain words in tonight's show, but also to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. Our focus must now move on to securing the future of independent broadcasting for Scotland by growing our subscriber base and regular monthly funding. But just one last thing before I do go this evening. We're currently working on a special for general election night. If all goes according to plan, I'm going to be hosting the entire night from say about from 10 o'clock onwards in the evening through the night. We're going to have guests like Linda Fabiani, we hope, and we're hopefully also going to be having live coverage coming in from the counts in various places across Scotland. So it would be great if you could join us, and if you're looking for an alternative source to mainstream media, and we're going to be concentrating on the results and what they mean for Scotland. So Scotland Chooses is going to be on election night, 4th of July, from 10 o'clock onwards, right through the whole night. So Scotland Counts, forgive me, rather than Scotland Chooses. Again, I'll try and get this right for future programmes. But that's it for tonight. So thank you for watching, and hope to see you on debate general election night 2024.